The morning sun cast long shadows across the cobblestones of Windsor Castle as Sergeant James Morrison adjusted his scarlet tunic for the 100th time. 23 years of service in the Coldstream Guards had prepared him for many ceremonies, but today felt different. The wedding of Prince William and Catherine Middleton would be watched by 2 billion people worldwide, and every detail had to be perfect. James ran his fingers along the golden buttons of his uniform, each one polished to mirror brightness. The red wool felt heavier than usual, weighted with the significance of the day. His bearskin hat sat precisely at regulation height, the chin strap cutting into his jaw as it had during countless rehearsals. The plume of white feathers caught the morning breeze, a stark contrast against the deep black fur. Behind him, 49 other guardsmen stood in formation, their boots creating perfect parallel lines on the ancient stones. Each man had been selected not just for his military bearing, but for his ability to remain motionless for hours under the scrutiny of cameras and crowds. They had practiced this ceremony dozens of times, walking the route from Westminster Abbey to Buckingham Palace until every step was muscle memory. The weight of tradition pressed down on James's shoulders as heavily as his ceremonial sword. His father had stood guard at Queen Elizabeth's coronation in 1953, wearing the same style of uniform, carrying the same sense of duty. The red coat he wore had been the symbol of British military might for over 3 centuries, worn in battles from Waterloo to the Falklands. Today it would serve a different purpose, but the honor remained unchanged. As the clock tower chimed 7 in the morning, James could hear the distant sounds of London awakening to the royal wedding day. Thousands of people were already gathering along the procession route, many having camped overnight to secure the best viewing spots. Television crews from around the world had positioned their cameras at strategic points, ready to capture every moment of the ceremony. The other guards remained silent, their faces set in the stoic expressions they had perfected during years of training. But James could sense the nervous energy beneath their disciplined exterior. Today would test everything they had learned about precision, endurance, and unwavering focus. One mistake, one moment of weakness, would be witnessed by millions and remembered in the history books. Inside the castle walls, final preparations were underway. The bride's dress had been delivered under the strictest security, its design kept secret until the moment she would step from her car. The groom waited in his military uniform, his own nervous energy carefully controlled. Royal protocol demanded perfection from everyone involved, from the Archbishop of Canterbury to the youngest page boy. James remembered his first ceremonial duty as a young private, standing guard outside Buckingham Palace while tourists snapped photographs. He had been so focused on not moving that he had barely noticed the grandeur around him. Now, as a sergeant, he understood that their role was more than decorative. They were living symbols of British heritage, representing centuries of tradition and service to the crown. The radio crackled to life in his earpiece, bringing updates from security teams positioned throughout London. Every building along the route had been searched, every manhole cover sealed, every potential threat assessed and neutralized. The Metropolitan Police had deployed their largest ever security operation, with snipers on rooftops and plainclothes officers mingling with the crowds. As the minutes ticked by, James thought about the significance of what they were witnessing. Royal weddings were rare events, moments when the entire nation paused to celebrate. The last royal wedding of this magnitude had been Prince Charles and Lady Diana Spencer in 1981, and before that Princess Margaret in 1960. Each ceremony had its own character, its own place in history, but all shared the same elements of pageantry and tradition that made Britain unique among nations. The sun climbed higher in the sky, promising a perfect day for the outdoor portions of the ceremony. Weather had been a constant concern during the planning stages, with contingency plans prepared for everything from rain to snow. But today, it seemed, even nature was cooperating with the royal schedule. The clear skies would provide perfect visibility for the millions watching on television and the thousands lining the streets. The morning sun cast long shadows across the cobblestones of Windsor Castle as Sergeant James Morrison adjusted his scarlet tunic for the 100th time. 23 years of service in the Coldstream Guards had prepared him for many ceremonies, but today felt different. The wedding of Prince William and Catherine Middleton would be watched by 2 billion people worldwide, and every detail had to be perfect. James ran his fingers along the golden buttons of his uniform, each one polished to mirror brightness. The red wool felt heavier than usual, weighted with the significance of the day. His bearskin hat sat precisely at regulation height, the chin strap cutting into his jaw as it had during countless rehearsals. The plume of white feathers caught the morning breeze, a stark contrast against the deep black fur. Behind him, 49 other guardsmen stood in formation, their boots creating perfect parallel lines on the ancient stones. Each man had been selected not just for his military bearing, but for his ability to remain motionless for hours under the scrutiny of cameras and crowds. They had practiced this ceremony dozens of times, walking the route from Westminster Abbey to Buckingham Palace until every step was muscle memory. The weight of tradition pressed down on James's shoulders as heavily as his ceremonial sword. His father had stood guard at Queen Elizabeth's coronation in 1953, wearing the same style of uniform, carrying the same sense of duty. The red coat he wore had been the symbol of British military might for over 3 centuries, worn in battles from Waterloo to the Falklands. Today it would serve a different purpose, but the honor remained unchanged. As the clock tower chimed 7 in the morning, James could hear the distant sounds of London awakening to the royal wedding day. Thousands of people were already gathering along the procession route, many having camped overnight to secure the best viewing spots. Television crews from around the world had positioned their cameras at strategic points, ready to capture every moment of the ceremony. The other guards remained silent, their faces set in the stoic expressions they had perfected during years of training. But James could sense the nervous energy beneath their disciplined exterior. Today would test everything they had learned about precision, endurance, and unwavering focus. One mistake, one moment of weakness would be witnessed by millions and remembered in the history books. Inside the castle walls, final preparations were underway. The bride's dress had been delivered under the strictest security, its design kept secret until the moment she would step from her car. The groom waited in his military uniform, his own nervous energy carefully controlled. Royal protocol demanded perfection from everyone involved, from the Archbishop of Canterbury to the youngest page boy. James remembered his first ceremonial duty as a young private, standing guard outside Buckingham Palace while tourists snapped photographs. He had been so focused on not moving that he had barely noticed the grandeur around him. Now, as a sergeant, he understood that their role was more than decorative. They were living symbols of British heritage, representing centuries of tradition and service to the crown. The radio crackled to life in his earpiece, bringing updates from security teams positioned throughout London. Every building along the route had been searched, every manhole cover sealed, every potential threat assessed and neutralized. The Metropolitan Police had deployed their largest ever security operation, with snipers on rooftops and plainclothes officers mingling with the crowds. As the minutes ticked by, James thought about the significance of what they were witnessing. Royal weddings were rare events, moments when the entire nation paused to celebrate. The last royal wedding of this magnitude had been Prince Charles and Lady Diana Spencer in 1981, and before that, Princess Margaret in 1960. Each ceremony had its own character, its own place in history, but all shared the same elements of pageantry and tradition that made Britain unique among nations. The sun climbed higher in the sky, promising a perfect day for the outdoor portions of the ceremony. Weather had been a constant concern during the planning stages, with contingency plans prepared for everything from rain to snow. But today it seemed even nature was cooperating with the royal schedule. The clear skies would provide perfect visibility for the millions watching on television and the thousands lining the streets. Inside Westminster Abbey, Corporal Sarah Mitchell stood at her designated position near the altar, one of the first female guards to participate in a royal wedding ceremony. Her selection had been controversial in some quarters, but her exceptional service record and unwavering dedication had silenced most critics. The red tunic had been specially tailored to accommodate her smaller frame, but the weight of responsibility felt just as heavy as any of her male colleagues experienced. The ancient abbey was a masterpiece of Gothic architecture, its soaring arches and intricate stonework creating an atmosphere of divine majesty. Light filtered through the stained glass windows, casting rainbow patterns across the floor where kings and queens had been crowned for nearly 1,000 years. The smell of flowers filled the air, arrangements of white roses, lily of the valley, and myrtle creating a natural perfume that complemented the solemnity of the occasion. Sarah had studied the history of Westminster Abbey during her preparation for today's ceremony. She knew that she was standing in the same spot where Queen Elizabeth II had been crowned in 1953, where Charles Dickens and Geoffrey Chaucer lay buried, where the marriage of Queen Elizabeth and Prince Philip had taken place in 1947. The weight of that history was humbling, a reminder that she was participating in something far greater than herself. The Abbey was filling with guests, a carefully orchestrated procession of royalty, politicians, celebrities, and representatives from Commonwealth nations. Each arrival was precisely timed, their seating arranged according to strict protocols that had been refined over centuries. The Prince of Wales took his place in the front row, his own wedding to Lady Diana Spencer 30 years earlier, still fresh in the memories of many present. Foreign dignitaries filled the distinguished seats, their presence testament to Britain's continuing influence in global affairs. Prime ministers, presidents, and monarchs from around the world had traveled to London for this occasion, their attendance both personal tribute and diplomatic statement. The ceremony would be broadcast to their home countries, showcasing British traditions and values to a global audience. Sarah could see the Archbishop of Canterbury making final preparations at the altar, his ceremonial robes magnificent in their simplicity. He had spent weeks preparing for this moment, studying the couple, understanding their wishes, and crafting a ceremony that would speak to both their personal love and their public responsibilities. The marriage service itself was based on the traditional Book of Common Prayer, its words unchanged for centuries but eternally relevant. The choir was taking their positions in the ancient stalls, their voices soon to fill the abbey with music that ranged from classical hymns to contemporary compositions. The organist tested his instrument, the deep notes reverberating through the stone walls and creating an atmosphere of anticipation. Music had always been an integral part of royal ceremonies, its power to move emotions and create shared experiences unmatched by any other medium. Camera crews moved discreetly through designated areas, their equipment designed to capture every moment without disturbing the sacred atmosphere. The images they recorded would be seen by an estimated 2 billion people worldwide, making this one of the most watched events in television history. The technical challenges were immense, but months of planning had ensured that viewers around the world would feel as if they were present in the Abbey. Sarah's earpiece crackled with updates from the security teams. Every entrance to the Abbey was monitored, every guest had been thoroughly screened, and armed police were positioned at strategic points throughout the building. The ceremony might appear serene and peaceful, but beneath the surface, a massive security operation was ensuring that nothing would disturb this historic occasion. The bride's arrival was imminent now, and Sarah could feel the tension building among the assembled guests. Conversations dropped to whispers, cameras were readied, and everyone turned their attention toward the great west door where Catherine Middleton would soon appear. This was the moment that millions had been waiting for, the culmination of months of planning and preparation. Royal protocol dictated every aspect of the ceremony, from the order of procession to the placement of flowers. Nothing was left to chance. Every detail had been rehearsed and perfected. Yet beneath all the formality and tradition lay a simple truth. This was a celebration of love between two young people who had chosen to share their most intimate moment with the world. The organ music swelled, filling the Abbey with triumphant chords that announced the beginning of the most significant royal wedding in a generation. Sarah stood straighter, her training taking over as the ceremony began. This was her moment to serve, to represent the finest traditions of the British military, and to play her part in creating a memory that would last forever. The great doors of Westminster Abbey swung open, and Catherine Middleton appeared in her flowing white gown, her train carried by small bridesmaids and page boys. The congregation rose as one, the rustling of fabric and creaking of ancient wood creating a symphony of movement. Captain Robert Hawthorne, positioned near the entrance, felt his breath catch despite his years of training to remain emotionless during ceremonial duties. The bride moved slowly down the aisle, her father Michael Middleton beside her, their steps measured and deliberate. The dress was a masterpiece of craftsmanship, its lace sleeves and flowing skirt creating an image of timeless elegance. Behind them, the bridal party followed in perfect formation, each child carefully coached in their roles during weeks of rehearsals. Robert had witnessed many royal ceremonies during his 15 years with the Grenadier Guards, but this felt different. The atmosphere was charged with genuine emotion, not just the formal respect usually associated with state occasions. The couple had captured the public's imagination in a way that few royal relationships had managed, their romance seeming both fairy tale perfect and refreshingly normal. Prince William waited at the altar, resplendent in his military uniform of the Irish Guards. His nervousness was barely detectable, controlled by years of training and public appearances, but Robert could see the tension in his shoulders. This was no ordinary bridegroom, but a young man about to marry the woman he loved in front of the largest television audience in history. The Archbishop of Canterbury began the ceremony with words that had united couples for centuries. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered together here in the sight of God, and in the face of this congregation, to join together this man and this woman in holy matrimony." The familiar phrases carried extra weight in this setting, spoken in the presence of kings and commoners alike. As the service progressed, Robert marveled at the bride's composure. Catherine spoke her vows clearly and confidently, her voice carrying to every corner of the abbey. She had transformed from a middle-class girl into a future queen, but she had done so with grace and dignity that earned respect from even the most skeptical observers. The exchange of rings was particularly moving, the simple gold bands symbolizing the couple's commitment to each other and to their future roles as representatives of the crown. These were not just personal vows, but public promises to serve their country and uphold the traditions of the monarchy. The weight of that responsibility was enormous, but both bride and groom seemed ready to embrace it. Music filled the abbey as the choir performed pieces specially chosen for the occasion. Traditional hymns alternated with more contemporary selections, creating a balance between ancient tradition and modern sensibility. The acoustics of the abbey transformed every note into something magical, the voices seeming to come from heaven itself. Foreign guests watched with fascination, many experiencing British royal ceremony for the first time. The precision and pageantry impressed even those from countries with their own rich traditions. This was theater on the grandest scale, but theater with profound meaning and centuries of history behind every gesture. Robert's earpiece brought updates from security teams throughout London. The crowds along the procession route were growing larger and more excited, but remained peaceful and celebratory. Police reported no incidents, just overwhelming joy and enthusiasm from people who had traveled from around the world to witness this historic occasion. The ceremony reached its climax as the Archbishop pronounced the couple husband and wife. The abbey erupted in gentle applause, a breach of normal protocol that reflected the genuine warmth felt by all present. Even the most formal dignitaries smiled, caught up in the infectious happiness of the moment. As the newly married couple began their procession out of the abbey, Robert prepared for the next phase of the ceremony. The carriage procession through London would test every aspect of the security operation, but it was also the moment when the British public would have their chance to celebrate with the royal couple. The bride's transformation was complete now. Catherine Middleton had entered the abbey as a commoner, but she emerged as the Duchess of Cambridge, destined to become queen consort someday. The smile on her face showed that she was ready for whatever challenges lay ahead, supported by her new husband and welcomed by a nation that had already taken her to their hearts. The ancient stones of Westminster Abbey had witnessed another chapter in the long story of the British monarchy, a story that continued to evolve while maintaining its connection to the past. Robert felt privileged to have played his small part in this historic day, knowing that he would remember every detail for the rest of his life. The golden state carriage emerged from Westminster Abbey into brilliant sunshine, drawn by 8 magnificent gray horses whose coats gleamed like silver in the morning light. Lance Corporal David Walsh stood at attention along the mall, his position carefully chosen to provide maximum visibility for the crowds while maintaining clear sightlines for security purposes. The roar from the spectators was deafening, a wall of sound that seemed to make the very air vibrate with excitement. Prince William and his new bride waved from inside the carriage, their faces radiant with happiness. The Duchess had changed into a second dress for the procession, this one designed for easier movement and better visibility from the carriage windows. Her smile was genuine and warm, acknowledging the thousands of people who had waited hours just for a glimpse of the royal couple. The procession moved at walking pace, allowing the crowds maximum time to see and photograph the newlyweds. David could see people crying with joy, children waving flags enthusiastically, and elderly veterans standing proudly to attention as the carriage passed. This was more than a wedding procession. It was a celebration of everything that made Britain unique among nations. Behind the main carriage came a carefully orchestrated parade of royal family members, each in their own horse-drawn vehicle. The Queen and Prince Philip rode in understated elegance, their presence lending gravitas to the proceedings. The Prince of Wales and Duchess of Cornwall followed, their own marriage now a distant memory compared to the fresh joy of this young couple. Military bands stationed along the route struck up patriotic melodies as the procession passed, their music adding to the carnival atmosphere. The sound of trumpets and drums echoed off the buildings, creating a soundtrack that would forever be associated with this magical day. Street performers and buskers had positioned themselves at strategic points, their own celebrations adding to the festive mood. David's training had prepared him for crowd control, but nothing could have prepared him for the sheer scale of public enthusiasm. Police estimated that over 1 million people lined the streets of London, creating the largest peaceful gathering in the city's history. The logistics of managing such crowds were staggering, but somehow everything was working perfectly. Television cameras captured every moment from multiple angles, their images being broadcast live to viewers around the world. Commentary teams described the scene in dozens of languages, their words carrying the excitement of London to every corner of the globe. This was British soft power at its most effective, showcasing the country's traditions and values through spectacular pageantry. The carriage horses maintained their steady pace, despite the noise and excitement around them. These animals were specially trained for ceremonial duties, selected for their calm temperament and reliability under pressure. Their riders were master horsemen, capable of handling any situation that might arise during the procession. David could see other guardsmen stationed at regular intervals along the route, their red uniforms creating a human corridor of honor for the royal couple. Each man stood perfectly still despite the chaos around them, their discipline a testament to months of intensive training. They were living symbols of British military excellence, their presence both decorative and functional. The route passed some of London's most famous landmarks, each building draped with flags and decorations for the occasion. Buckingham Palace loomed ahead, its facade gleaming in the sunshine, Union Jack flags flying proudly from every flagpole. This was the destination of the procession, where the royal couple would appear on the famous balcony for the traditional wedding kiss. Foreign tourists mixed with British locals in the crowds, their cameras and videos creating a permanent record of this historic day. Many had traveled thousands of miles specifically to witness the royal wedding, making this one of the most significant tourism events in British history. Hotels across London were fully booked, restaurants had created special menus, and shops displayed royal memorabilia in their windows. The economic impact of the royal wedding extended far beyond London. Street parties were taking place in villages and towns across Britain, communities coming together to celebrate in true British style. Pubs had opened early, serving traditional fare and raising toasts to the happy couple. This was the Britain that the world loved to see, warm, welcoming, and proudly traditional. As the carriage approached Buckingham Palace, David could see the massive crowds gathered in front of the building. The famous balcony stood empty, waiting for the moment when the royal couple would appear for their first public kiss as husband and wife. This would be the climax of the day's celebrations, the image that would appear on front pages around the world. The sun continued to shine brilliantly, as if nature itself was blessing this royal union. Weather had been a constant concern during the planning stages, but today had dawned clear and bright, perfect for both the outdoor ceremony elements and the millions of photographs being taken by professional and amateur photographers alike. The massive iron gates of Buckingham Palace swung open to receive the royal carriage, and Sergeant Major William Hayes felt a surge of pride as he supervised the final positioning of his guardsmen around the palace courtyard. 38 years of military service had brought him to this moment, standing in the shadow of the building that symbolized the British monarchy to the world. The roar of the crowds outside the palace walls was so loud it seemed to shake the very foundations of the ancient structure. Inside the palace courtyard, everything was precise choreography. The carriage came to a halt at exactly the predetermined spot, the horses stamping their feet and tossing their heads after the excitement of the procession through London's streets. Grooms stepped forward to steady the animals while footmen positioned the mounting blocks that would allow the royal couple to alight with dignity and grace. The Duke and Duchess of Cambridge emerged from the carriage to spontaneous applause from the palace staff who had gathered to witness this historic moment. Even the most senior servants, normally models of restrained professionalism, couldn't help but smile at the obvious happiness of the newlyweds. The Duchess's dress had survived the carriage ride perfectly, its flowing lines as elegant as when she had first appeared at Westminster Abbey. William watched as the couple was escorted into the palace by the Lord Chamberlain, their steps quick and eager as they moved toward the famous balcony, where hundreds of thousands of people waited to see them. Behind them came the senior members of the royal family, each playing their part in this carefully orchestrated drama that had unfolded exactly as planned. The Queen appeared remarkably energetic despite her advanced age, her face showing genuine pleasure at the success of the day's events. She had attended dozens of royal weddings during her long reign, but this one seemed to have a special significance. Perhaps it was the obvious love between the couple, or maybe the enthusiastic response from the British public. But something about today felt magical, even to someone who had experienced a lifetime of royal ceremonial. Outside the palace gates, the crowd had swelled to unprecedented numbers. Police estimated that over 500,000 people had gathered in the immediate vicinity of Buckingham Palace, with thousands more watching from nearby parks and rooftops. The atmosphere was festive and good-natured, with strangers sharing food and drinks, children playing games, and impromptu sing-alongs breaking out spontaneously. Television crews positioned around the palace prepared for the money shot, the moment when the royal couple would appear on the balcony for their first kiss as husband and wife. This single image would define the royal wedding for posterity, appearing in newspapers, magazines, and history books for generations to come. Camera operators checked their equipment one final time, knowing that technical failure at this crucial moment would be career-ending. William's earpiece crackled with communications from security teams throughout the area. Despite the massive crowds, the mood remained celebratory and peaceful. The British public was at its best today, showing the world the qualities of good humor, respect, and genuine warmth that made the nation special. There had been no incidents, no disturbances, just overwhelming joy and enthusiasm. Inside the palace, final preparations were being made for the balcony appearance. Protocol officers briefed the royal couple on the precise positioning required for optimal visibility, while sound technicians tested the amplification system that would carry any words to the waiting crowds. Every detail had been planned and rehearsed, but the spontaneous nature of the public response had exceeded all expectations. The balcony itself was decorated with flowers in the royal colors, their fragrance adding to the magical atmosphere of the day. This famous platform had witnessed countless historic moments, victory celebrations, jubilee appearances, and royal announcements that had shaped British history. Today it would host another chapter in the continuing story of the British monarchy. Royal photographers moved into position to capture the official images that would be released to the media. These pictures would appear on stamps, coins, and official portraits, creating a permanent record of this historic day. The technical challenges were immense, balancing the need for perfect lighting with the spontaneous nature of the moment. Palace staff lined the windows overlooking the balcony, their faces reflecting the excitement of the crowds below. Many had worked for the royal family for decades, but few had experienced anything comparable to the enthusiasm being displayed today. This was confirmation that the monarchy remained relevant and beloved, despite the challenges of modern life. The moment was approaching when the royal couple would step onto the balcony to greet their subjects. William could hear the anticipation building in the crowd outside, their voices creating a constant hum of excitement that penetrated even the thick palace walls. This would be the culmination of a perfect day, the image that would symbolize the beginning of a new chapter in royal history. The French doors to the Buckingham Palace balcony opened, and the roar from the crowd below was unlike anything Guardsman Michael O'Brien had ever experienced in his 8 years of ceremonial duty. Positioned directly below the famous balcony, he felt the sound waves wash over him like a physical force as 500,000 voices joined together in celebration. The Duke and Duchess of Cambridge stepped into view, and the very air seemed to vibrate with the intensity of the public's joy. The couple waved to the massive crowd, their faces glowing with happiness and perhaps a touch of amazement at the scale of the response. The Duchess looked radiant in her wedding dress, the afternoon sun catching the intricate lacework and making her appear almost luminous against the dark backdrop of the palace facade. Prince William, still in his military uniform, stood proudly beside his new wife, his smile broad and genuine. Behind them on the balcony appeared other members of the royal family, the Queen wearing a cheerful yellow coat and hat, Prince Philip in his naval uniform, and the Prince of Wales with the Duchess of Cornwall. The younger royals, Prince Harry and the bridesmaids and page boys, completed the family tableau that would be remembered for generations to come. The crowd's chanting grew louder and more rhythmic. Kiss! Kiss, kiss! The traditional call that had greeted royal couples for decades echoed off the buildings surrounding the palace, creating an acoustic phenomenon that seemed to envelope the entire area in sound. Michael had heard this chant before during previous royal appearances, but never with such passion and volume. The couple exchanged glances, sharing a private moment of amusement at the crowd's enthusiasm. Then, in response to the overwhelming demand from their subjects, they leaned toward each other for the kiss that the world was waiting to see. The moment their lips met, the roar from the crowd reached a crescendo that seemed to shake the very foundations of the palace. Camera flashes created a strobe effect that lit up the afternoon sky, as thousands of professional and amateur photographers captured the iconic moment. This single image would appear on the front pages of newspapers around the world, becoming one of the most recognizable photographs of the 21st century. The technical achievement of the media coverage was staggering, with live broadcasts reaching an estimated 2 billion viewers worldwide. Michael maintained his position at attention throughout the balcony appearance, but he couldn't help being moved by the genuine emotion of the moment. This was more than just pageantry or tradition. It was a real celebration of love and hope that had touched people around the world. The royal wedding had provided a rare moment of unity and joy in an often troubled world. The couple remained on the balcony for several more minutes, waving to different sections of the crowd and acknowledging the enthusiastic response. Children were lifted onto shoulders for better views, elderly people wept with joy, and Union Jack flags waved in a sea of red, white, and blue. This was the British public at its finest, showing the world why the monarchy continued to command such affection and respect. As the royal family finally retreated into the palace, the crowd began a slow dispersal, but the celebratory mood continued. Street parties that had been planned months in advance were beginning across London and throughout Britain, with communities coming together to toast the royal couple and enjoy traditional British fare. Pubs stayed open late, television coverage continued with analysis and replays, and social media exploded with images and comments from the day. For Michael and his fellow guardsmen, the formal duties were complete, but the memories would last forever. They had played their part in one of the most watched and celebrated events in recent history, maintaining the highest standards of military bearing while the world's attention focused on their every move. Their scarlet uniforms had provided the perfect backdrop for royal romance, their discipline and precision adding gravitas to the joyful chaos of the day. The economic impact of the royal wedding would be felt for months to come, with tourism, merchandise sales, and media coverage generating hundreds of millions of pounds for the British economy. But more importantly, the wedding had provided something that money couldn't buy, a shared moment of happiness that had united people across social, cultural, and national boundaries. As the sun began to set over London, casting long shadows across the palace grounds, Michael reflected on the privilege of serving during such a historic occasion. The red uniform he wore connected him to centuries of military tradition, to guardsmen who had stood at attention during the coronations of kings and queens through wars and peace, celebrating the continuity of British institutions and values. The royal wedding was over, but its impact would continue for years to come. The Duke and Duchess of Cambridge would carry the hopes and best wishes of millions as they began their married life, in service to the crown and country. and the guardsmen who had stood watch during their wedding day would always remember the moment when love, tradition, and national pride came together in perfect harmony under the clear blue skies of a perfect English spring day.